So the dash in here needs to be cleaned and sanded and repainted. Got the paint for it. First part of the step is to remove this piece of trim that runs up at the base of the windshield. So short, stubby screwdriver, I'll do that. So that strip is off all the way around. Now the next thing that needs removing is this fascia piece out of here, and the same thing out of there, and then this radio housing comes out. Now it's still painted interesting, this is the silver that would have matched the original of this car prior to it being painted jewel blue. Now I think this would have always been blue. Not sure why this is a different color. But anyway, we'll get to removing screws. Now, in order to remove this fascia, surround, whatever we want to call it here, this plate, I may have to remove the old gauge cluster here, which is okay because I need to replace this piece right there. It's a separate piece with to get rid of the paint. So this plate all around in here, I believe, we'll take the rest of these screws out, but I think that this glove box door needs to come off. If it does, it uses that screw underneath in 3 places. Alright, so it wasn't quite that. This piece just is a trim piece. I went ahead and, like I said, took the door off because it exposed this part of the dash. Under here is going to have to be sanded and all painted anyway. That is the broken switch for the glove box door light. These are little rubber pads. We'll save those. That's a little insert piece there too. All right, we'll keep on going and see what that strip looks like on that side. Like I said, it's still probably going to want to take out the gauge cluster, but we'll see. So it's coming back to me. Yeah, this plate goes all the way and in screws to the gauge housing, gauge cluster. So we will be taking out the gauge cluster. So in addition to these screws up here, we'll need to take down the heater adjustment, and then there's a couple of screws over there, and then I believe we also will need to lower the front of the steering column here, which we're very familiar with doing. So let's get to it. So in order to finish getting out the gauge cluster, which is very loose, I removed the speedometer cable that comes into the back, unscrewed that, but it also appears that I need to disconnect the shifter cable. Now obviously there are plugs for everything back here, but I believe I can reach them. There's enough slack that I can pull this out enough to unhook them without lying on my back and trying to get underneath here. But anyway, we need to remove that clip and remove that nut, and then this cable should pop out the back. So that's what we're going to aim to do next. That is the little E-clip that holds the end of the transmission shifter cable. I've gotten that nut loose there, so I should be able to pop that off of there. And take a screwdriver in another hand, but we'll get it off. All right, so the blue wire goes to the back of that blinker. The plug there for the fuel line is pretty easy. All of the brown wire ones illuminate the back of the dash. Again, another blue wire here that goes to the other blinker, and then more brown wires, and finally, yeah, the lighter's already disconnected, so I may have just pulled that one out. So let's get those last ones off. Oh yeah, so the headlight switch is out, the ignition switch is out, and the wiper connectors have been disconnected too. All right, some other things. This strange wire, which I guess is a light to illuminate the shifters. Anyway, very small light. It fits. There we go. It fits into that socket, aiming at the back of the lights. Then there were a couple of connectors that went into the transmission. One is the neutral safety switch, and the other is the backup light connection. And then there were some more of these bulbs to illuminate the back of the dash. And I think I've got it to the point where it can come out. Let's see. Okay, we've got one green light, and that is the high beam light. So I need to disconnect that. I'll put you down. So that is the back side of the gauge cluster, and that is the opening of the gauge cluster. That bundle of wires, it's all taped around, actually runs through that clip and through that clip when it's done correctly. So this, oh, that's for the fuel gauge. Yeah, I know. Somewhere in here is a resistor that is in line with the fan button, or the fan switch. So the last thing to do now is remove the radio. All right, this knob was on quite snugly on this dial on this side, and the post on the other side just had things on fairly loosely. So now that exposes the two nuts, and the radio should back out of the housing with those nuts removed. All right, we're looking at the underside of the radio. We've got 3 blade connectors here coming in the bottom. There's my finger. That is the front of the car. So this is the driver's side over here. And then we also have this, there it is right there, that strap supporting the rear of the radio. So we'll remove that nut and screw, nut and bolt, and then we'll remove those connectors, and we should be good to find out what else is in the way. So unfortunately there are no nuts on this side. The nuts are up against, the nuts are opposite inside this cavity here. So I will reach in with a ratcheting wrench and undo those nuts. We've got the dash apart. Well, that's not true. I do have the ashtray to take out. So we're going to get some sandpaper and go at this thing with some sandpaper. And then we'll hit it with some primer, lightly sand it, and then shoot some color coats on it. So there's a couple of clutch head screws there that hold the shifter mechanism on. I want to get those off. Clutch head there, slotted, slotted. Actually, the slotted ones stay on. It's the Phillips head ones and the clutch head ones that come off in order to free this sheet metal surround, whatever, from the gauge cluster. And then there's also something that holds this panel on, and it could be that I have to just take off. Now, we'll take it apart, keep going till we can break this part loose. That piece is separate. All right, so washer switch is out, and that was a set screw. It's in here somewhere. There we go. That set screw, off came the shaft, exposed the retaining nut. Now I'm pretty sure this housing on the lighter rotates separate from the main. It's like a cover, retaining cover, and there's a thread up there. So I need two hands. One hand to hold this from turning while I turn that side. So yes, indeed, that whole thing was threaded onto the body of the lighter. Once I removed that, then this piece just came off. So I should be able to clean this carefully, polish it up, get rid of that blue paint. That's what I'm hoping for. We'll see what happens. I think it's time to call it a day, though. Certainly can clean this up. It's possible I have another gauge cluster that I can go to, but for now, we'll call it a day. I have an assortment of sandpapers here, 60, 80, 100, 150, and then even finer in the box of painting supply stuff. So I'm going to start with the coarsest and knock down all of the nastiness on this dash, and we'll also want to deal with this. Now I have new pieces. Actually, that's not bad. I have new pieces for the other ones, so we'll save the painting and sanding for just the parts that I don't have replacements for. Here's where I'm at. Got these parts sanded or wire brushed down, where they're relatively smooth and the rust is gone. You can see through the windshield here that other than wiping things down, that is pretty smooth. Rust is removed. Regardless, I'll still shoot it with the Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer, and then top coat it with the blue that matches that. That is what I shot the other night. Slight change. I'm going to use a different primer because that Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer was clogged. Masked. I'm going to shove towels and such into that opening and into that opening and cover the steering wheel next. Towel shoved in. It'll be interesting to see how I am able to get the primer and paint in back behind there. Maybe at an angle will be okay. All right, put some primer on. Okay, they say 10 minutes and I can top coat it. All right, we're gonna put on some top coat now. Try to stay out of my light. So that has the second heavier coat on it. Hopefully 2 coats are sufficient. Hopefully I was able to not have a shadow there. We'll close it and possibly do another coat on top of the ashtray lid. So I have a mask on. This is what first lighter coat ended up looking like in here. Say 1 or 2 more coats in there and we'll be done. Maybe with a little more light, that'll help. That's the first light coat of the blue. I'm going to take this down, disassemble it the rest of the way so that I can do a better job with cleaning the metal without bothering this very fragile lens, soft lens. So it's just a matter of these flathead screws, and that should remove this portion off of the, we'll call it the gauge housing, and leave just the lens. Alright, the screws are out. This just lifts off. It's rather clean. I'm sure sitting out will make it dirty. And then there's this backing piece here. Black paint and green paint on this side. I don't know why. I'm sure there's some reason. And then the lens just pops right out. So I should be able to polish and clean that. I think I'll spread out that towel and lay this on top of the towel. Okay, one of the items here is this little lens just sits in that opening. At this point I can keep that over there. Keep that over there. So I'm just going to be careful not to disrupt this area while I'm using some paint remover in here to very carefully remove the blue overspray from the car being painted. The aircraft stripper's out. A little bit in the corner. Dab it with a paper towel. Apply it and let it sit. Who knows what mess it's going to make. But I think a lot of this is covered by the bezel piece. So a little bit more up there. That was a little. Okay. Now we just wait. Oh. Guess that goes there. So, yeah. I think I have another gauge cluster in my collection of stuff. We'll see. If not, we'll just polish that up. Have a little crack. Give it a little personality. All right, in the past, I've used some steel wool to remove the paint stripper. Let's make this go away, and we'll let it sit a little longer and peel. So the paint is off, but yeah, it left some reminders that it was there. I've cleaned the lens, blew off that black backing plate, cleaned the lenses through there. Oh, you can see that you can see things rather clearly now. So the gauge cluster is ready to go back in. So hopefully the camera does it justice. Turned out pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good, all things considered. I mean, I could have sanded a lot more. Could have put in Bondo, but the car is otherwise imperfect, so we will go with this. We'll let the paint cure before we try to put that gauge cluster back in. I already showed you the gauge cluster put together with the cleaned up fascia piece there, trim piece. I've now attached the hood piece. Again, there were 3 screws, 2 of which hold the clips for the wire harness, and then that one Phillips head that's set there. So this is the assortment of finish screws. Some of them go here. There's 12. This is the piece that is over the glove box. And then some of them fit in the trim pieces here. And there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those. So if I go over here and count, I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 15 of that size, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 of that size. So if I put 3 of those over there, so now I got 12. I do know that, so those shorter 12 I believe go to here because it's a shorter reach. I know that 3 of these will attach the heater control. So what does that leave me with? Let's see, those 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Look at that. All right, so that's what I will continue on now, using these 9 longer ones for attaching the trim on the dash. Now, it kind of makes sense because these were the ones that I cleaned a lot of blue paint off of, and I did notice that when they had painted that before, they just shot the screws. So onward and forward. Strips are in. It's there. I got the one in the glove box. I put that one in first just to make sure that the little screws had the right bite on the holes that were previously there. So before I get to installing the gauge set, cluster, whatever, I'm going to check all of the bulbs, make sure none of them are burnt out. Let's do a continuity check on them.